You're 23 years old, discharged from the Mexican Marines with nothing but a folder of papers and a head full of dangerous knowledge. You grew up in Aguililla, Michoacan, avocado country, where the government exists as a concept, but rarely as a presence. You joined the Marines at 18, not out of belief, because Aguililla offers 3 futures, and 2 of them end before you turn 25. 4 years. Counter-narcotics operations across 4 states. Your commanding officer writes in your file, exceptional situational awareness. In your 4th year, your unit runs routine reconnaissance through a Sinaloa valley. 8 men. You've done this 40 times before. The ambush comes from 3 directions simultaneously, coordinated and precise, the kind that only happens when someone sells your route in advance. 3 men from your unit die in that valley. You survive on training alone. Sitting in the dirt, you already know the route was sold. You file a report, you name the security failure, and request an investigation. 6 weeks later, you receive a discharge notice. Performance concerns. The country that trained you decided your report was more dangerous than the leak that killed 3 of your men. You go home to Aguililla. Sophia finds you on the stone wall where you used to sit at 12. She doesn't ask what happened. She just sits beside you until dark. 3 weeks after your discharge, a man named Commander Vega arrives in Aguililla. He knows your name, your service record, and what happened in that valley. He doesn't pretend he's offering something clean. He says, same skill set, different employer. He explains it like a mechanic. No apology. He tells you the salary and the name of the man you'll be protecting. A name you've heard the way you hear mountains before you see them. You think about the 3 men who died, about 6 weeks of silence after you asked for justice, about what loyalty to an institution costs. You tell Vega, yes, the next morning, not for the money, because the institution that trained you already answered the question of whether it deserved your loyalty. Training begins immediately. Not weapons. You have that. Observation. How to read a room, a crowd, a space, without becoming part of it. Vega tells you, the Marines trained you to eliminate threats. This job is about anticipating them. You are no longer a soldier. You're a bodyguard. You learn to drive at speed without braking, to move a principal through a crowd, to tell the difference between a threat and a deliberate distraction. The night before you meet El Mencho, you lie awake, not from fear, but the specific tension of stepping into a room you cannot step back out of. The ranch outside Guadalajara costs more than your entire street growing up. El Mencho is eating breakfast. He looks like someone's grandfather. He does not look up. 3 bodyguards are positioned around the courtyard. You understand immediately, you are being evaluated without being watched. El Mencho nods once. That is the interview. He speaks for 8 minutes about a distribution problem in Veracruz. Specific numbers, implied consequences, then silence. Nobody needs to respond. You already understand his language. Your assignment, inner circle protection. 1 of 4 bodyguards within 30 meters at all times. You sleep where he sleeps. You move when he moves. The first rule is silence. You do not speak unless spoken to. What happens inside 30 meters does not exist outside it. Nobody writes this down. In your first month, you notice 3 things. He never eats with company. He reads every morning for an hour, and he never gives an order twice. Sophia calls on a Thursday. She asks how you are. You say fine. She asks what fine means, and you realize you don't have an honest answer. You travel 6 states in the first year. Each one shows you how completely the CJNG is woven into Mexico, not outside the system but a layer of it. El Mencho speaks rarely. When he does, the room changes temperature, not because he raises his voice, but because his words cannot be recalled once delivered. In March 2019, a Sinaloa hit team targets the convoy on a Guadalajara highway overpass. The next 11 seconds are the longest and fastest of your life. When it's over, El Mencho straightens his jacket and looks at you the way a commanding officer reviews a field report. He says 2 words, good instincts. After Guadalajara, Vega moves you to first position, the last line, the one who stands between El Mencho and everything that wants him dead. First position means you know more, hear more, see more. You also understand with complete clarity what happens to people who know too much and become unreliable. El Tuli appears in your 2nd year. El Mencho's financial architect. He always notices who is in the room, even when he appears not to. The first time El Tuli looks at you, it's not how people look at bodyguards. It's how a man who calculates value looks at an unaccounted asset. Sophia visits Guadalajara for 2 days. At dinner, she watches you scan every person entering the room. She says quietly, you didn't used to do that. In 2020, the pandemic arrives, borders tighten overnight. You watch the CJNG adapt to a global crisis faster than any government institution. The organization moves like water. El Mencho distributes food to Jalisco communities during the lockdowns. You guard the trucks. He allows photographs. The image is as deliberate as everything else about him. The DEA places El Mencho as their #1 target in 2020 with a $10 million bounty. He reads the report at breakfast and finishes his coffee. $10 million. You can feel every person near him running the calculation. You run it too, not from planning, but because running it tells you who you've become. You stop running the calculation, not because the answer frightens you, but because you know what happens when someone makes decisions from the wrong kind of math. In 2021, his wife is arrested. His son is in a U.S. prison. His brother in a Mexican jail. He absorbs the news for 40 minutes, then logistics. That capacity to absorb catastrophic personal loss and continue operating is more unsettling than anything you saw in the valley or on that Guadalajara highway. The Sinaloa War escalates in 2022. Colima becomes the highest per capita homicide rate in Mexico. You ride in 6 territorial operations that year and see things with no frame. After each operation, you return to your post. You stand outside the door. The work is the same. You are not, but measuring the difference would mean stopping. You call Sophia after every operation. She asks how you are. You say fine. She has stopped asking what fine means. Neither of you says what you're really saying. In early 2023, you marry Sophia in Aguililla. El Mencho gives you 4 days. Vega attends as the only guest from your current life. He doesn't stay for the meal. On your wedding night, you realize this is the first major decision in your life that was entirely yours. Then remember it happened inside a 4-day window someone else granted. You return after 4 days. El Mencho looks up from breakfast and asks, "How is she?" It's the first personal question he has ever asked you. You say, "Good." In 2024, El Chapo's sons engineer the arrest of their own partner El Mayo. A civil war erupts inside Sinaloa. El Tuli says Sinaloa is bleeding from both ends. El Mencho listens and says one word, carefully. That single word contains an entire operational philosophy you've learned to translate. CJNG moves into 6 Sinaloa territories in 8 months. You sleep in vehicles. Some nights you don't sleep. The work does not adjust to you. You adjust to the work. Sophia tells you she's pregnant from a safe house in Zacatecas. Her voice on the phone is the only real thing in the room, and the room is very large. You ask Vega for a transfer out of first position, something with less travel, less exposure. He says he'll ask. The way he says it carries the answer already. El Mencho takes you to a room you've never been in. He says, "A man with a family is a better man." He pauses. He is also a man with more to lose. He doesn't say you can't leave. He doesn't say what happens if you try. He doesn't need to. The Valley in Sinaloa taught you about implied consequences. You say, "I understand." Trump takes office in January 2025. The U.S. designates CJNG a foreign terrorist organization in February. El Mencho's bounty rises to $15 million. He eats the rest of his eggs. $15 million. You think about a route sold for a fraction of that. About 3 men who died because someone's calculation came out differently than yours. El Mencho changes protocols. Fewer meetings, more movement, a new location every 72 hours. Your son is born in January 2026. You are in Colima. Vega gives you 11 minutes on a video call. The connection drops at the moment of birth. When it comes back, he is already here. You name him after your commanding officer, not the one who signed the discharge papers, but the one who died in the valley in Sinaloa, whose name needed somewhere to land. In February 2026, El Mencho begins moving differently. Single vehicle, small escort, you and 1 other bodyguard, heading up mountain roads into Jalisco. The destination is Tapalpa, pine forest, isolated roads, the kind of place a man with a $15 million bounty and 30 years of war might go to remember stillness. The cabin complex is modest. Wooden structures in pine forest, no visible security perimeter. That is the perimeter. The best security is invisibility. Vega taught you that. 12 days in Tapalpa. El Mencho sleeps more than you've ever seen him sleep. He walks the pine forest in silence. He eats simple food. He calls no one. On the 4th morning, a helicopter route repeats at the exact same time as the morning before. Same bearing, same altitude. You report it. 20 minutes later, Vega calls, "Move the schedule up, check exits, be ready by dawn." He hangs up. You understand dawn means now. On the 13th day, El Tuli calls your phone at 5:47 a.m. He never calls you directly. When you see his number, you already know what the call is. El Tuli says 3 words. They have coordinates. You move immediately to El Mencho's cabin. He is already awake, already dressed. He looks at your face and says, "How long?" He picks up one bag. He pauses at the cabin window and looks out at the pine forest for 3 seconds. Then he turns and says, "Let's go." You step out first. You scan the tray line. The forest is completely still. Soldiers come from 3 directions simultaneously. Special forces, military camouflage, moving through the trees with precision that only comes from training on this exact terrain, with these exact coordinates. El Mencho's detail opens fire. 4 trained men against a special forces unit backed by military aircraft and U.S. intelligence. You do the math in 4 seconds. Your job is not to fight the soldiers. Your job is to move El Mencho to the tray line on the 4th side. Vega taught you there is always a 4th side. El Mencho runs. He is 59 years old. He runs like a man who always knew this morning was coming and spent 30 years deciding how he would meet it. They come from the 4th side too. Of course they do. Today the coordinates are complete. Today the U.S. intelligence package covers all 4 sides. There is no 4th side. The 2 bodyguards behind you go down. El Mencho takes 3 rounds. He doesn't fall immediately. He takes 3 more steps, deliberately, on his own terms. El Mencho looks at you and says nothing, but you have spent 4 years inside 30 meters of this man. You know how to read what his silence contains. The soldiers put him on a helicopter. You are restrained on the ground. You watch it rise above the pine trees. First time in 4 years that 30 meters wasn't enough. El Mencho dies on the helicopter before it reaches Mexico City. February 22, 2026. A federal agent reads you the announcement from his phone like a weather report. Within hours, the CJNG response begins. 250 roadblocks across 20 states, burning vehicles from Jalisco to Chiapas. Mexico becomes a war zone for 72 hours. You are in a military detention facility in Jalisco, sitting in a metal chair, thinking about the valley in Sinaloa, about the report that ended your career. 2 federal agents enter, professional and calm, with water. They ask your name. You give your real name, one you haven't used professionally in 3 years. They ask what you know. You think about 47 meetings in year 1 alone, 6 states, rooms with no windows. What you know could fill a federal case running a decade. You ask for a lawyer. They bring one in 40 minutes. Young federal public defender. The kind of young that means he studied for this but hasn't lived it yet. You think about Sophia, your son, 1 month old, the stone wall in Aguililla where you used to measure how wide the world was. You cooperate, not from fear, because you spent 4 years inside an organization that taught you loyalty is not a virtue, it is a calculation. You have learned to calculate. You give them routes, contacts, meeting locations, financial architecture, enough that cooperation means something. El Tuli is arrested the same day, organizing retaliation from a safe house in El Grulo. Soldiers reach him before evening. He doesn't make it to custody. Vega is arrested 3 days later. You hear it from your lawyer on a Tuesday and think about everything Vega taught you that turned out to be true and the things no one could teach you. Sophia brings your son on day 5. You see him for the first time through a visitation room window. She doesn't cry. She asks if the part you were in is finished. You say, "The part I was in is finished." The legal process takes 11 months. Cooperation agreement. Reduced charges. You think about the valley, the discharge papers, the ranch courtyard, El Mencho eating breakfast like a man with nowhere in the world to be. You think about El Mencho kneeling in the pine needles, his silence at the end. You are released on supervised conditions in January 2027. Sophia is there. Your son is there, walking now unsteadily, in the way of someone who has recently decided the ground can be trusted. Some evenings you stand at the edge of the avocado fields in the last light. You don't think about the valley to punish yourself. The CJNG fractures after El Mencho. Regional bosses dispute territory. New violence across Jalisco, Colima, Zacatecas. The leader is gone. Your son walks toward you across the kitchen floor with the confidence of someone who doesn't yet know what the world is capable of. You are not innocent. You know this with the same precision the Marines taught you to know terrain before entering it. You also know innocence was not the available option after Sinaloa. El Mencho's file says born July 17, 1966. Died February 22, 2026. That's a wrap. This story is fiction built from real events. El Mencho was killed February 22, 2026, in Tapalpa, Jalisco, in a joint Mexican-U.S. intelligence operation. Every year, thousands of former Mexican military are recruited by cartels because the institution that trained them offers no viable path forward. If this one stayed with you, drop a comment and tell me which moment. Subscribe to POV Boss Explainer, new story every week.